All right, today is August the 28th, 2018.
Yes.
And we're going to interview Dave Hayward today, and we are the interviewers, meaning the interviewers Randall Kumba and Cal Goff. We're doing the interview at Cal's house, and this is part of a Gay Spirit Visions oral history project that is sponsored by Georgia State University. So, Dave, I want you to state your name, where you live, and about how long you've lived there.
Okay. My name is Dave Bryant Hayward, and I live at 491 Seminole Avenue, Roanoke, which you know well.
And Little Five Points.
Little Five Points. I lived there 25 years.
Okay. All right. Okay. The first and only question about your remote past is going to have to do, what we're trying to do is connect Gay Spirit Visions in a certain way with your genealogy a little bit, but also with your childhood. And we're going to jump from that. So this is a multi-part question, and instead of reading the whole thing out, I'm just going to do each part.
Good.
If you'll talk about where you were born,
Okay.
Where your parents were from, how they met, if you know, and where your people are from.
Okay.
Okay. So that's the first part.
Okay.
Where do you hail from?
Well, I was born tomorrow, August 29th. That's my birthday. 1949. And I was born in Newport, New Hampshire, and that was my mother's hometown. My parents had what they called a mixed marriage at the time, because my dad was a WASP, White Anglo-Saxon Protestant, and Danish as well, and my mother was Irish Catholic, and that was a mixed marriage.
How did they meet?
They met at my at my father's front porch in Gorham, New Hampshire.
Okay.
She went up there. It's way up in the mountains in northern New Hampshire.
Why was she there?
She was there with a friend of hers, Marion Reichert, and she had grown up with my dad and his family and knew them. My mother was from Newport, like I said, and I guess she went to visit her in Gorham. And so they were on the front porch, and sounds to me from what my mother said later that there was this big sexual charge because my father came in sweaty from playing tennis.
This is commercial.
Yeah, when she talked about it, she did, of course, she was very proper, but when she talked about it, it sounded to me, I think she really liked what she saw. And so, anyway, they connected, and then I think he offered, she was a student at the University of New Hampshire in Durham, which is I brought a map, I don't know if you need that or not, which is way in the southeast. There's a little bit of seacoast between Massachusetts and Maine, and so Durham is right inland from there. So it's the end of the state, the other part of the state, and I think, I don't know if he offered deliberately to drive them to Durham, but he did. And so Marion said, "Will you sit in the front seat with him because you get him to talk?" Because my mother was she thought she was Scarlett O'Hara. She was like the New Hampshire version of Scarlett O'Hara, and very talky and flirtatious and a kind of a vamp. And then he was quiet. Yeah. So anyway,
So do you have siblings?
Yes, I have an older sister. She was born 1945. Okay. And then I have a younger sister. I just saw her. I just came back from a trip. So my older sister is Judy. My younger sister is Nancy. She was born in 1956. And then I have a gay brother, who was born in 1958. And so there's a big gap. There's almost 7 years between my sister and me. And the story I was heard too many times was, it was such a difficult birth, and my mother didn't think she could have any more children. and I sort of had ruined her or something. So, and then later, a doctor examined her. Just like 7 years later, and said, "You can have more kids."
Oh.
So she did. So they had 2 more.
Okay.
So there's a big separation, though.
Did you know your grandparents?
Yes, I did.
Both sets?
Well, my grandfather died when my dad was 13, so I never knew him. He was a doctor, Hannibal Hamlin Bryant. He was a doctor in Gorham, and the big, town doctor, family doctor, and stuff like that. And then, so my grandmother was like a widow for over half a century.
Yeah.
And my father also had a younger sister, and it was just kind of like the 3 of them, and especially my dad and my grandmother. And that was also, my grandmother was not happy at all that my father married an Irish Catholic, so it was tumultuous. And then my mom's family, the Irish Catholic side, my grandfather ran a hotel, the Newport House in Newport, and then my grandmother was really the best part of my life, my childhood, which is very, very nurturing and maternal. My mother's mother,
Okay.
and gave me all the loving that I could ever want.
Okay.
So I was very close to her.
All right.
Yeah, Mimi, Eileen Gould. So.
Okay. Is there anything in particular you can remember from your childhood that you think was an imprint into your current person? I mean, that it is still alive today in the way you are? Was there any particular thing that happened, or a relationship that you had? Maybe this grandmother you're talking about.
Yeah, I would say that was my most profound experience of being loved.
Okay.
And loving, and I felt very, very connected with her, and then I think that by extension it was because there was difficulty between my mother and me, and my mother was she was verbally abusive and sometimes physically abusive, and that's taken me eons of therapy. But I think in the larger sense, my parents were, one thing positive I can say about them is that they were very much like for social justice.
Yeah.
And my dad, for example, kind of, maybe sounds kind of corny or hokey or something, but they belonged to a country club. In Dover, New Hampshire, where I grew up, and the country club did not accept Jewish people, and my dad was at the forefront of saying this is wrong, and we have to do this, and so growing up in New Hampshire, I mean, we were a minority because we were Irish Catholic, and then the other 2 big minorities were French Canadians and Jewish people, and So I was proud of him for that, and he really kind of instilled that in all of us, and all of my siblings. This social justice, and I didn't grow up with. I mean, we never had there were never epithets. Is that right? Epithets.
Yeah.
Never bad words about any other groups.
Okay.
Although I did hear some bad words about being Irish Catholic.
Oh.
So.
Did since we have never interviewed anybody who was born in the Northeast.
Oh, you haven't?
Do you think that had anything to do at all with? Is that an important factor, or does it not register with you that much where you're from, or do you feel any connection with that part of the world?
It's funny because I was just there. I just came back from a trip. I love New England. I mean, I loved it and everything like that. But it was something I really wanted to experience a different part of the country. To not stay in New England my entire life.
Okay.
And to go someplace else,
And
kind
that's
of
because
wanderlust. That I was just curious about, things going on, and also I felt that I felt a little isolated growing up.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of ways, personally, psychologically, but especially geographically, because there wasn't much going on. We were not too far from Boston,
Yeah.
and my family, that we traveled and all that kind of stuff, and so we took trips and things like that. We went to Boston often. It was a big cultural center, but I really wanted to live in the city,
Okay.
and then a lot of that had to do with my wanting to come out. Because I started realizing when I was about 15 or so.
Well, we'll get to that in a moment.
Yeah. Okay.
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 So you still return there periodically to see your family?
Well, my siblings are still there.
They did not want to get out.
Well, yeah, kind of interesting because my sister is in Massachusetts, my brother is in Boston, my other sister is in Greenwich, Connecticut. Now she kind of moved because she lived in New York City for a while, and her ex-husband is from New York. Yeah, I mean, I was the one who really broke away.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Okay. We're going to leap into another area now, biographical area, and that's the next question is going to be about your coming out experience.
Okay.
But before we get there, could you just give us kind of the arc of your relationship history, your partnership history?
Oh, you mean
when was the first one you had, and just the sequence, how many you've had?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let me
just significant relationships.
Let me preface. So what I ended up doing was when I went to college, I went to George Washington University in Washington, D.C., and that's where I came out.
Okay.
And I became, active in the gay community and going out and things like that. And then the Gay Liberation Front when it started in D.C. And I didn't realize that I had never really been in love before until after I graduated in 71. I moved to Atlanta the end of 71, and I finally met somebody that I really fell in love with. Peter, and so we saw each other. I think I met him in 73, I think, and then we were involved until he moved away. I think it was like 76, 77. But I really, before that, I mean, it was kind of like, I discovered how much I love sex and how much I love men, and but I hadn't really loved anybody, really fully, passionately, wholeheartedly.
And was there a gap after Peter?
Kind of. Not, maybe a couple years, because then I met Greg. Remember Greg James? Yeah, Greg James. And I think he moved here in 77, I think. And we were...
From where?
He had gone to college in Earlham in Indiana, and was from Ohio.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where exactly in Ohio now. But he had kind of come straight from graduating from Earlham, and then came here. And I met him, and see, one of the problems with Peter was that Peter identified as bisexual, and was not really, I think I was the second major gay relationship he'd had, I believe. That was the problem, and so after that I thought, I don't want to deal with any more bisexuals. So I was really happy to meet Greg, who was a gay activist, and that was not, part of it at all. And so we got really involved in the Gay Liberation Front, the Atlanta Gay Liberation Front, and then we'd known each other and had this really intense relationship, and finally moved in together in 1979. And then I felt like I was a success as a gay man, because I finally lived with a partner. It's important to me.
Okay.
So, and then it was. I was a little older. I turned 30 that year, and I was ready to settle down, and he wasn't. and then there were a lot of other factors. So we only lived together that year.
Mm-hmm.
And then those are the two major relationships I feel like I've had, and I've had other, passionate affairs and relationships, but in terms of a real significant other, I know it's been a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So let's go back a little bit and describe your coming out experience. How did that unfold? You said in college?
Yeah. So actually, when I came out as gay, you mean instead?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
And this was before your brother came
well,
out?
yeah.
'Cause he wasn't born yet, or he wasn't?
He was born in '58.
Okay. He was back at home still?
Yeah.
While
yeah.
you were in college?
Oh yeah, definitely. Because
All right.
that was Because I went to college, started George Washington University in 1967. I went to a college prep school, preparatory school, for 3 years before I went to George Washington. And my experience was that I'd grown up with all these people in Dover and going to school and stuff like that, and they sort of were kind of used to me. And all these people at Berwick Academy were not. And
was this in Maine?
In Maine, yeah, South Berwick, Maine. It was just over the line. It's like when you see the geography of it. I mean, it's all, there's a little bit of New Hampshire scrunch between Massachusetts and Maine. So I basically crossed the state line every day to go to school. Excuse me.
So was that a difficult 3 years?
It was terrible. It was awful. It was horrendous.
And you were like 18 or?
I was really bullied.
Or
Well, I
younger?
started Berwick Academy when I was 15.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was really bullied a lot. And it was funny in retrospect because I remember this one guy took me aside and he told me how to be manly. And it was funny that he did that. And I kind of wondered. I wonder now. It's like was he also gay? And that was a way of him. But it was great.
Yeah.
It was great because he taught me. He said, "Okay, a man wipes his mouth this way, and and this is how you do the manly things." And it helped a lot because then I stopped being bullied so much. Because I think I was a little femme, and I really, back then they were talking about 64, 65, and it was before this whole kind of concept of being bullied and that kind of thing.
And was it a tradition in your family to send people to private school?
No, it wasn't.
Why did that happen?
No, it wasn't. I don't know. My mother would get all these kinds of ideas, and it's sort of like, okay. So her idea was that I needed to go to a private school, and I commuted. I was a day student, so I lived at home. And that if I wanted to get into a really good college, that's what I needed to do. I needed to have a better education than I was going to get at the high school. Because no one else, my two sisters and my brother, they didn't go to private school. But I did. The only reason I'm talking about this is because it was like they pointed out to me, you're gay, before I knew I was gay. And I didn't really... it was a while before I really identified, as being gay. And I remember I had a huge crush on this guy in school, and that didn't go anywhere. But I sort of stalked him, followed him around the school. So to actually say when I went to George Washington, one of the reasons I wanted to be in Washington D.C. was that I thought, okay, I can come out there, I can be a gay man and have a gay life and also be in a big city, and so my story of that was I went to see Reflections in a Golden Eye, the movie. It was 1967.
I remember.
And you remember? Yeah. and it was one of the first movies that had homosexuality. I mean, Marlon Brando played a really repressed gay man who was married to Elizabeth Taylor of all people. And
it wasn't a very happy story.
No. And there was male nudity, which was very exciting, Robert Forster. Anyway, I went to see that movie, and I went by myself, and it was appalling to me, because I thought, here I was 18 years old, and I thought, I'm like Marlon Brando. This old man, to me, was really an old man, and very repressed, and he ended up stalking Robert Forster after he sees him naked in the woods. And so I left the movie, and I thought, all right, I've got to do something about this, because here's this old guy.
You don't want to end up like that.
I don't want to be him. Yeah. I felt like I was him, because I was 18, and here I'd been in prep school, and mostly a male prep school, and the closest thing that anything had happened was with that guy, who actually physically offered himself to me, and I didn't know what to do. So I really just kind of caved in inside, and sort of repressed it. But I had all these thoughts and all these feelings and all these desires, and so I left the movie, and I went to this all-night cafe, and there was a guy there who I thought was stunning, gorgeous. He was very, very blonde. At that time, I was really attracted to blondes, redheads, and so the movie kind of, it really said, all right, now you cannot be this Marlon Brando, for God's sakes. And so I just stared at him. I mean, I just thought, I don't give a shit anymore. I don't care what anybody in this, if they're noticing or anything like that. I just stared at him. And, he stared back. He looked back. And the minute he and his two friends got up and got out, I threw my money down the counter and followed him. Ran right outside. And I had read this book. It's called Naked to the Night. It must still be in print somewhere. But that was what told me about gay life, and how gay life is supposed to be, and stuff like that. And it's about a guy who becomes a gay male hustler. So it talked about how gay men meet. This is like, mid-60s. So I followed him outside, and his friends got in the car, and he stood on the corner. So I said, "Have you got a cigarette?" That was what I learned from Naked to the Night. That's how gay men meet, over cigarettes and everything. And he said, Eric was his name, and he said, "Well, why don't you come back to my apartment?" And I thought, I'm gonna get into a car with three men I don't know. It's like, oh Christ. And so I said, okay, but if I'm uncomfortable or anything happens in the car, you have to let me out. Oh, we will. But it turned out that they were fine. So I ended up going to his apartment, and I think he lived in Maryland or Virginia or something like that. It was outside the district. And I remember we went back to his apartment, and Quo Vadis was on TV. So we sat on the couch and watched Quo Vadis for a while, and then started passionately making out.
So this was a positive first experience, or mixed?
It was positive for the night. The problem is that I don't know why I can't remember why I didn't have his phone number or something like that. I must have. But we were supposed to meet a week later, and he didn't show up. then I didn't know what to do. He was the only gay man I knew, you know. He was very excited when we actually got into the bedroom, and I told him I'd never done this before. That was a big turn on.
Yep.
You haven't? What? Because I was the aggressor.
Yeah.
I mean, I was the one who pursued him. So, yeah. So that was. I had a great time with him. I really enjoyed the sex, and I liked him, and we talked a lot, and then I never saw him again.
Well, did it confirm for you in any way that you needed confirming that this is what you wanted to do and be and all that? I mean, was it significant otherwise or not?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I knew I liked it,
Okay.
and I knew I really was turned on to him, and I was very happy
Okay.
physically. The thing that was really hard about it was having nowhere to go.
Yeah.
You know, because at the time, and this is what I like to tell people, is that this is a major urban university, you know, the fall of 1967, and there was nothing gay. There were no gay groups, you know. So, you know, it was very lonely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. Yeah.
And then I can tell you how I actually sort of came out into gay life
Okay.
after that.
We'll
Okay.
do
Should I
that.
just go ahead? Okay. So, so I basically kind of went back in the closet again, and there were different things that happened, but I basically had that one sexual experience, and then this was about May of 1969, and I joined a fraternity, and I was going down to downtown DC and finding gay magazines and that kind of thing, and so I wasn't out to people.
But the antenna were out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was in my dorm, and I was looking at a book. It's Edward Muybridge, and he was the early photographer, and he took a lot of male nudes. And so I was looking at that book, and then there was a knock on my dorm room door, and this guy I had a big crush on in my fraternity, Mark, was at the door. So it was a sign. Reading the Muybridge book, and Mark comes to my door.
Yeah.
So I felt, again, it was a real catalyst from a negative thing, because we sat on the edge of the bed and we looked at the book together, and I basically, I was like, practically right on top of him, and nothing happened, and then it turned out that he came out without me. It turned out he'd been fooling around with another guy in the fraternity, so he left, and I said, I can't do this anymore. I'd had the experience with Eric, and it was like, all right, I've got to come out, and I've got to come out into gay life, and I've got to be living a gay life. I'm not, and so like all of us at the time, we would pour through the libraries and research and everything. And I knew that there was a thing called the Mattachine Society. So I called the Washington, D.C. Mattachine Society, and Frank Kameny, legendary Frank Kameny, answered the phone. And I said, is this the Mattachine Society? He said, yes, it is. And I said, well, I'm homosexual and I feel very bad about it. And he said, why do you feel bad about it? And I couldn't say anything, because I went, I don't have to feel bad about it. Oh my God, I don't have to feel bad about it. I thought I had to feel bad about it. And so just his question alone was life-changing. I wrote about it in one of the articles I gave you. It was like, so then I told him all the reasons I felt bad. And he had his, please, no. He was a very New Yorker. And so he told me where to go. And I said, I don't want to go to bars all by myself. And he said, no, you have to, you must, you should, you got to. And so he gave me all these lists of places to go, you know. And then I started going out to gay bars, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it was really lonely.
Mm-hmm.
And I met people, you know, I made friends and everything. And the thing that was really great to me was when I finally met a group of guys who were students at the University of Maryland, and that was just outside of DC.
Right.
And so it was exciting to me to finally have a peer group,
Yeah.
you know, of other young gay men.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Stonewall happened. So when I called Frank, it was just a couple months before Stonewall, and 6-7 weeks, something like that. And I went back to New Hampshire for the summer. I was working for my hometown newspaper, and then came back to DC for my junior year. And then the DC Gay Liberation Front started in January of 1970.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said before, as soon as there was something to do, I did it.
Yeah.
Because Frank, he didn't really have a group.
Uh-huh.
You know, there wasn't anything I could really join in terms of Mattachine. So.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so now comes the GSV part.
Okay.
And before we get to that, it'd be nice to hear, before you ever knew about GSV, what kind of spiritual path were you on, if you thought you were on one? What kind of, what was your religious background?
Mm-hmm.
And then what, if anything, did you get exposed to or look into before GSV occurred?
Well, like I said, I was raised Catholic.
Okay.
Yeah, and so and that was a bone of contention because my dad was Protestant, so we were Catholic.
Was it the usual internalized homophobia version of Catholicism, or?
When I talk to people, I really feel for people who were raised Southern Baptist
Mm-hmm.
and all that kind of thing because I never experienced in Mass, going to Mass, hearing anything,
Mm-hmm.
but it was kind of tacit that I knew that being gay was not okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't remember ever hearing any blatant homophobia.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that I was really moved going to church every Sunday,
Mm-hmm.
and would really feel the upsurge of spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And then would have a hard time trying to do that during the week because I really wanted to daily kind of.
Mm-hmm.
I've always felt that I've had a real thirst for spirituality,
Mm-hmm.
and so when I went to George Washington, I got real involved with the Christian Science group.
Mm-hmm.
And got real involved with that for like about a year, and that was interesting to me. It was very, very different from Catholicism, but I really studied it really hard, and then I got very disillusioned when Bobby Kennedy was killed,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of gave up on. Just went away from the Christian Science thing. And also, I went to see a Christian Science practitioner who was the advisor to the student group, and I confided in him that I had gay feelings or was gay.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me in no uncertain terms that if I persisted in this, that I was putting myself outside of Christianity,
Yeah.
because the basis of Christianity was the family.
Yeah.
And I was putting myself outside of that. And he also told me, so I wonder about him, because he also told me that what would happen would be that I would come out and these gay men would use me and then they would throw me away, toss me away.
Mm-hmm.
So that was pretty devastating,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was thinking that was maybe after I'd had the experience with Eric, I can't remember for sure.
Yeah.
So in terms of spirituality, I've always been very, very interested in it, and very interested in metaphysical things, and GSV is just a natural outgrowth for me of that.
Now, when does the astrology part come in? Was that less of a spiritual practice and something else, or was it part of something important to you?
It's all of a piece.
Okay.
It's all. I mean, it's like I think that I was thinking about this before the interview, and I think in some ways that I'm an anomaly, because I've always been. I was really excited when the Gay Liberation Front started and when Stonewall happened, and so I've always sort of felt like an activist, like a political activist, and then also considered myself an artist, you know, as a writer, and I got my degree in drama and that kind of thing, and you know, got really involved with acting, and in the same time, a lot of times I would encounter people in the arts who were completely apolitical. And then I would encounter people who were activists, political activists, who were completely non-artistic. And then I would encounter people who were completely non-spiritual, you know, who were maybe artists or political activists and weren't spiritual. And I'm all of those. I'm all of those things, you know. So when the astrology, there was a group at George Washington that was sort of a metaphysical group, an astrology group, and I really got involved with that. And you know, the basis of astrology, there's a lot of spirituality to it. There's a lot of metaphysical aspects to it. You know, I mean, I'm a believer in reincarnation and past lives and things like that. And I feel like some of that expresses itself, you know, through what I've done. So I've always been really very much at home with that. And I'm real grateful that I have a spiritual practice and a spiritual discipline, and every day whenever I get up and I take a shower or a bath, I meditate, and it's great, and it just has saved my life.
Okay. Was it pretty clear to you from a young age that the organized religions that existed it was not going to be a good fit for you?
Well,
did you look into Unitarianism or Quakerism or any of those other organized religions at all?
I felt real.
Besides the Christian Science.
Yeah. The Christian Science was the biggest thing. Because I really went away from the Catholicism. Although I still sort of felt Catholic deep inside. But I really objected to the church being so anti-gay or not supportive. Pardon me. So I was always drawn to alternative, to metaphysical groups, and I would go to groups like that in Washington. And when I moved here, kind of, esoteric groups and New Age groups and metaphysical groups, and I've always been involved with those.
Okay. Okay, do you remember who first told you about gay spirit visions?
Yes, well, it grew out of the Radical Fairies.
Okay.
And so I remember that we had the 1978 Southeast Gay and Lesbian Conference, and it was here in Atlanta. It had been in other places. And I remember connecting with Frank Abbott, and not Franklin Abbott, and we were talking about, going to Running Water Farm and having these gay spiritual retreats and everything for gay men. And I went to, I think, the very first retreat they ever had at Running Water. And so it's just an outgrowth, out of the Radical Fairies and the Running Water retreats. Michael Wilson owned the farm. Then Gay Spirit Visions evolved out of that. And it was kind of like, okay, so I think Michael, I can't remember the chronology, but Michael sold the farm.
Yeah.
And so there were no longer retreats at Running Water, and then the GSV started, and like I said, I mean, as soon as something to do, I did it.
Okay.
So it's sort of like, okay, it was just a natural extension. Okay, so we're not doing Running Water anymore. We can't go there anymore. So now we have the Gay Spirit Visions that's starting. So.
And you went to the first Gay Spirit Visions conference in 1990. Okay.
Was that 1991? Was that right?
90.
Oh, 1990. Okay, 1990.
Okay, so maybe you've already answered this question. What was going on in your life that made you receptive to deciding to attend it? It was just, like you say, it was an outgrowth of what you were already involved in. The people.
Yeah, I've always.
You already knew the people.
Yeah, I knew the people. I knew Frank, and I knew Terry Barfield, and Frank's partner Neil Adams, I guess, Neil Adams, and then Raven. Russ Craven's Raven Wolf Dancer. So I knew all of them, and we had known each other for years, and we had been involved in working on the Southeast Conference, and so I knew all the people that were starting it.
Okay.
So again, that was just sort of like. It's kind of funny to me. It's like, okay, we're doing this, now we're doing that.
Yeah.
Now we're doing this kind of thing. Because the thing about Running Water, it was completely amorphous, and you would go there and there was no agenda.
Yeah.
There were circles.
Did it feel very spiritual or just sexual or?
Both.
Yeah.
It was very spiritual and it was very sexual.
Okay. What was spiritual? What was spiritual about it?
Well, just the idea of being in a circle, and the whole thing about doing heart circles and that whole concept, and then there was very much a thing of back to the land, and I remember that when I would go to Running Water, I would really feel a conflict between living in Atlanta and being committed to the city and city living and an urban person, and this whole sort of thing about that we need to go back to the land, we need to be in the country, and it was, and I really.
You did not want to do that.
I didn't. I didn't want to do it. Thank you, Randall.
Okay.
And I would go there and I would think, well, this is what these guys are doing and what they're really, and then there also would be a lot of trashing of the city and urban life, and a lot of thumbs down and a lot of dissing of that kind of life and living like that. And I thought that I really want to be in the city, and also as a writer. I mean, it's like, okay, if you want to write and publish and be in magazines and newspapers, at the time, I mean, you really, as before the internet.
No internet.
Yeah, it's like, thank you.
Okay. What do you, can you set aside in your brain and your memory that first conference from all the other ones that you went to, or can you not? Because
I think I can.
Okay.
I remember that it was interesting to me that this was the direction we were going, because it was always very directed, and it's kind of like, okay, you would go there and there would be a timetable, and there would be an agenda, and there would be workshops, and there would be things that there was a schedule, and that there was none at Running Water, which I didn't really like that much, because you would go there and think, well, no. I mean, it's a little boring. It's like, now what are we doing? And sort of hanging around. And GSV was very different. I mean, and I remember especially meeting Harry Hay, and I remember seeing him. Of course, Harry was this archetype. I mean, he was like, Harry Hay, you know, the it's kind of like Frank Kameny, but in a whole different spiritual sense of being like, you know, Mr. Gay or something, or Mr. Gay Universe or something like that. So I remember seeing him from across the room, and he was in this sort of faux Native American garb, you know, and I remember he was wearing a long skirt, and had all kinds of, you know, I guess the trinkets around his neck or something like that and everything. And so it's like, oh, Harry Hay, Harry Hay. So I walked up to him and said, oh, Mr. Hay, Harry Hay, it's like such an honor to meet you, and I'm so excited, and, you know, you're all that and everything like that. And I went in to embrace him, and he stuck his tongue down like that. Right.
Yes, we many of us
Right,
had that experience.
Right. He was like, and I remember, oh, you know, it was like, oh my God, my grandfather was French kissing me.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my dear, oh my God.
Uh-huh.
But it was funny because, you know, of course he was a horny old man, I think.
Uh-huh.
But also he was so much the trickster. And that was really interesting to me. I mean, it was such a shock. And at the same time, it was like, oh, okay, so this is not necessarily something that I need to be coming from.
Uh-huh.
You know, I mean, I didn't appreciate that.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a total invasion.
Uh-huh.
But on the other hand, it was like, okay, so don't put anyone on a pedestal.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it was a, you know, it wasn't like he proceeded to grope me or something like that.
Yeah.
But that's I guess Harry would do that, right? I was not the only person.
No.
Right.
We've heard this story.
You've heard the story. Okay.
And I was also there. So,
Okay.
yeah.
That's right. You were at the first one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember if anything at that conference, the first one, was new to you? That, you know, you thought, what is this? What is that? You know, or had you been inoculated so much from all the other stuff that it was nothing was alienating? Or
No, I don't think. No, I don't think anything was particularly new or alienating. I remember that we did the nude massage.
Oh, the
and
first
that
one?
was
Okay.
I don't remember if it was the first one, but a later one. We did the body electric.
Uh-huh.
That was part of it
Okay.
at one point, and
Well, anything else you can remember about the first conference would be interesting.
yeah. Well, I remember that, you know, Raven was one of the main people
Mhm.
in terms of making it happen,
Yeah.
I would say my experience was that Franklin just as much.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that I think they were the real thrust, Raven and Franklin, and then Terry Barfield was in there too.
What did it feel like to be there? It was apparently felt better than being at Running Water.
It did, yeah. But one thing, the accommodations, you know, I mean, you actually could be in a lodge or a cabin or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And I liked, it was to me it was kind of extremes, because Running Water was just so amorphous.
Yeah.
And then GSV was even maybe a little regimented.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of, like, you know, Achtung, and
Uh-huh.
you know, you did this, and, you know, timetable and that kind of thing. And
Time's
so,
up.
I know. It's like, so it was sort of like, okay,
A convention.
this is weird. This is different.
Mhm.
So that was the main thing that was the sort of dissonance for me.
Uh-huh.
But in terms of, you know, I mean, I've always sort of, like I say, I've always been really drawn to spirituality and metaphysics and meditation and what I call the booger kind of stuff, and
Uh-huh.
so I was completely comfortable with that.
How often did you attend conferences after that?
I tried to go as often as I could, and then it got to be something I couldn't afford to do.
Okay.
So.
And were there other things that would keep you from going or get you to go, other than the financial aspect of it?
You know, if I knew people who were going,
Yeah.
you know, if I knew you were going, for example, and other people,
Uh-huh.
you know, it's like, but as you remember, I mean, we're all part of sort of a general group So I remember that I tried to go regularly, and then it got to be something that was hard for me to afford.
Okay.
So.
Is there anything that happened at the conferences that you especially enjoyed? Any particular kind of activities or programs or something that's kind of one of your favorite parts, or not?
Well, I always really liked the Native American aspects and the sort of recognizing the directions, I really loved the spiral at the end when we would, go in a circle around, and I would really have a tremendous experience where I felt completely opened up, and all my chakras opened, the energy centers. And I remember one conference several years ago where I came back and I just really had that sense for a couple of days, several days of being, totally opened up. My experience of that would be that, through the conference, and especially the closing circle, that it would really open your heart and open your soul and your mind, and you would come back and be kind of on this sort of psychic high for maybe a week or something like that. But real life-changing. I do remember also, see all the kind of conferences that kind of run together. But I remember really enjoying the Body Electric and the nude massage, and that was a great experience to have, and that it was interesting that you actually did not have sex, but it was very sexual, and that was real. That was sort of mind blowing to me, and barriers crossing, and the whole idea about how sexuality can be different things. That it's not necessarily a genital or orgasmic orgasm. I remember really that wow, this is totally mind-blowing and opening, and because at the early running water events it was very sexual, and and it's like sometimes I remember the first one I went to was like, okay, well, I'm tired of having sex. Which hardly ever have that feeling, but it was like, okay, can we do something else now? So.
Do you remember any keynote people in particular, other than Harry?
Andrew Raymer.
Andrew, okay.
Andrew Raymer. Yeah, he's the first person that would come to mind. And I remember, I was really impressed with him and how he was able to take that spirituality and put it really into practice. Disciplines and activities, and then, of course, I was also inspired by him writing books. I mean, I've written a lot and published a lot, but I've never done a book. And then also John Stowe, who would come and he would do the flower essences and things like that. And it was interesting to me because I had met him years before, and I believe he was a biologist. I'm not sure, but he sort of was like a scientist, and I remember having a conversation with him where he kind of put all this stuff down, and then all of a sudden he was really into doing flower essences and sort of being a guru and a spirit, and I thought, well, that's an interesting trajectory. It's like, okay, from one side to the other. But I think he did some good work that way. In terms of coming up with those flower essences and the whole plant thing, and I've always that's not something that I do, but I'm interested in it. The whole idea about healing and herbs, and also crazy owl. Oh my God, Crazy of all people, who I just thought had incredible knowledge.
Mm.
And I think, did he ever come to a GSV? I think he might have.
I think so.
I'm not sure, but I remember that he was somebody who I thought was the real deal.
Yeah.
Who really knew a lot about spirituality and knew a lot about herbal medicine and healing and that kind of thing.
Okay. Did you ever get involved in planning any of these conferences? Were you
Yeah.
ever on some of the whatever they were?
Yeah,
task
I
forces and
would
whatnot?
do some of that.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember that I ever really got on the board. I don't think I was ever on the board particularly, but I think I did. I was involved with some of the planning.
Okay. Did you ever do any workshops there, or lead anything that you remember, or were you a participant every time?
I remember that I don't think I've ever led a workshop, but I loved when I would get to share some of the things I've written and do readings and things like that, and that was very it was very gratifying to me as an artist, as a writer, to get to do that, and it's a great audience. I mean, it's a very, you couldn't find a more appreciative group of people, or supportive, loving, nurturing. And I remember you said to me one time, I think it was something I read, and you said to me something about how we all do like different spiritual weaving in different kinds of ways, and you commented that what I had read was a kind of spiritual weaving. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, you do that well.
Thank you.
You remember the small group experiences, being in part of a small group each time?
Right.
That's one of the structural
Right.
things.
Right.
Were those good experiences for you? Do you think they're important to continue
Yes.
having?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Did you ever feel uncomfortable during a conference because of something that was going on, or something that you just remember feeling a little uneasy about? Or was it so much like all of the preceding things you felt like this is a safe space, nothing's going to startle me? It's all going to be okay. We're just trying to identify if there are aspects of these conferences that we could make a little less scary.
Yeah. I do feel that there is a kind of sexual pressure. I do feel
Really?
that.
Talk more about
I do
that.
feel that. And I remember that Tim got up and was sharing in a circle how he wanted to be intimate with everyone. I thought, well, I don't want that. I don't want to be intimate with everyone. And then it always seems to me that they'll talk about how there's a cabin where you can go, and that's available, which is fine. That's all good and everything like that. But I'll always feel like, okay, well, I'm supposed to do it. I'm supposed to find somebody, and I'm supposed to, and then it doesn't usually happen. See, that's the thing that's funny. It's like it was so easy at Running Water.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, it's like a free for all, especially in the very beginning. So I think that it could be more kind of like, well, if you want to do that, rather than there's almost like a have to involved, and then it's kind of like, and then if you don't get it on with anybody, I mean, I would sort of feel like, oh, that's too bad. I went to the conference, I didn't have sex, and it's sort of
And you think that there were signals from the conference planners or conveners that there were signals. It wasn't something you brought with you.
Well, it was sort of like, you go there and you think, gee, it'd be really great to, connect with somebody, and what a great way to connect with somebody, I like,
in a bar.
I like going and picking somebody up or having a booty call or something like that. But I do feel that there's an enunciation, there's a presentation of this sort of expectation or desire, and I would like to see that filtered a little more.
Okay.
That not so much that you're sort of expected to find somebody or to have sex there, and then if you don't, it's like, okay. Anyway,
is there anybody that you did meet through GSV conference, as opposed to meeting them here, that you're really glad you crossed their paths? Besides the keynoters, did you meet some folks who just were other participants that you remember? Oh yeah, that's how I met them. I met them at a conference.
Yeah, I remember that I've really connected with some people, and then it's been hard to keep the connection going.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a couple of people that I've met at conferences, and we would have a really great connection there, and then not keep up with each other.
These were people in Atlanta or not in Atlanta?
Yeah, I was thinking of a couple of people, and they were from other places, but it can be really hard to when you don't live in the same place.
Mm-hmm.
And then for me, it's like, I've been going since the beginning, and since before the beginning, with running water and everything, and so there's just people that I've just known for decades,
Mm-hmm.
that I've just kind of like, I wish that I maybe had a more deep connection with some of the individuals, because I think one thing that happens is you go there, and it's all sort of moon, June, croon, bloom, blue, and kind of like, okay, we're all like the age of Aquarius, and we're all denizens of hair or something like that, and so there's sort of the macrocosm, and then not so much the microcosm.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of it is kind of like, okay, we're all brothers, and we're like an army of lovers, but then not so much the really one-on-one, the real intimacy, individual. When I think about it, when you ask that question, I just sort of think about all these people that I've known for a long time, and have known me, and we're all sort of part of this, community and brotherhood and extended family.
Okay. What do you think GSV has contributed to your life? What would you credit GSV with that you wouldn't credit something else just as much for, as far as something you've incorporated into your outlook or your values, or do you ever talk to other people about GSV as being the source of X?
Yeah.
Or not, or is it too similar to what you've gotten from other organizations or other resources that you have?
Well, if it didn't exist, we'd have to invent it.
Okay.
That's what I would say. And the thing that I really loved about the fairy gatherings and GSV is that it is a gay spirituality. That I love that. And that it's now, because sometimes I know that I had the experience of being involved in metaphysical groups and all kinds of different New Age, you know, activities and meetings and organizations. It was the Foundation of Truth here in Atlanta for a long time. And then I remember one time I was really lectured by this very attractive young man about how he believed in the yin and the yang. And so that this was not okay in terms of being gay, because there was no yin and yang. It's just like, I don't know, I can't remember what's the male and the female, but which is the yin and which is the yang. So you don't have that, thank God. You know, it's like you haven't got that kind of homophobia going on. So that's really pivotal, integral, crucial to me, that there be a specific metaphysical spiritual practice that's gay. That's important to me. And like I say, I mean, you know, I would leave some of those conferences and just really be on a high, and have, you know, just really great experiences one-on-one. And then in the groups, I think those small groups are necessary, totally. That you have to have that, especially like this fall conference coming up, because they're so. Otherwise, it's really easy to get lost.
Do you think the conferences, the way they feel or the way they're done or any other way you want to look at it, have changed from the beginning, or are they pretty recognizable one to the other? I mean, have you noticed or observed any kind of morphing over the years? Say the first conference versus the one most recently that you went to?
I just wish that it weren't so compressed. That there was the schedule, the agenda would be a little more loose, and that there'd be more time between things. Because I know when I've been going to the recent conferences last couple years, and I'll just take some time to myself, but it also means that I'm missing things, that I'm not going to certain workshops, I'm not hearing certain speakers, because it's just too much. I mean, I just really need to, you know, like take a breather. Yeah. So I wish, and it seems to me that over the years that they've gotten a little more regimented. Okay. And so I it's really like night and day, you know, when you think about what Running Water was like, and what GSV is. So I would like to see it be a little more, just a little more time between things. And then I think my experience in the very beginning was that it was more of a sort of communal group, and now it seems like it's more individual. So because there was this whole sort of thing about like a brotherhood and an army of lovers, and it doesn't seem to be so much that way anymore. There's still that element there. But then sort of, and I think part of that too is that, you know, I've been involved in Atlanta since 1972 with the Georgia Gay Liberation Front, and there was a really small tight group of us who were activists, and most people were not, and so I kind of miss that sort of extended family feeling that was there. I don't know. I don't think I'm being as exact as I want to be, but there's this sort of sense now that you come and you know, all these people are more like individuals and not so much a collective, and then we talk a lot about that. But then, for example, there isn't a real active local group here, a GSV, local group. So.
Understood.
Excuse me.
Let's see. What advice would you give to somebody who's about to attend his first conference?
I just, relax and go with the flow.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like, when you go there, it's going to be like any other gay group, any other, congregating of gay men, and just roll with it. I mean, it's like you might be a little like, what's this? This saluting the directions and that kind of thing. So some people. I mean, I was pretty much okay with that. With any of the metaphysical.
When you went to the first conference, did you drive up there yourself?
No.
You went with somebody? Do you usually end up traveling with people to or from the conference? Is that something you would advise people to do, or is that just a convenience thing?
Yeah, I think it's the last one I went to, I drove on my own, and I think it's better to ride with somebody. Like I remember one time I rode with Deb, and we had a great time. We just talked and talked and talked on the way up and back, and I like that. So I think it's better, to ride with someone.
Okay.
And then also in terms of like what I would say to somebody, and it kind of is like what I said before. It's like, okay, so don't you get your expectations up too high, and excuse me. God. And don't feel like you have to hook up, because I do feel like there's a kind of pressure there.
Okay.
And because it's really, when you come right down to it, it's not about hooking up.
No.
I mean, that can happen. But
well, we certainly could be more explicit about. This is not required.
Yeah, I think so. I think that would be good.
It might make some people relax.
Yeah, and it's just kind of like, okay, that's fine, and that's good if it happens, and there's a cabin you can go to, and then there's these different workshops, the nude massage workshop or whatever. But like even just to hear somebody say, but you don't have to do it, and it's okay if you don't, and if it happens, it happens, and if it doesn't, it doesn't, and
Okay.
So.
No, I think that's useful to remember.
Yeah, I'd be happy for you to pass that on.
Okay.
So.
Is there anybody? We're doing interviews with people who've been to these conferences, trying to get across to people what it felt like to go to one of these conferences, as opposed to reading our minutes or the keynote description or something. So, are there people who are connected enough with GSV in your own mind that you think we should interview to get how they felt about these conferences, or not?
Well, you've probably done Frank, right? Franklin?
No. I don't think you've interviewed him, no.
Oh, I think he would be.
Okay.
He would be really important.
All right.
There's let's see. I went through. I looked at the list of people who passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, that's the next
I
question.
know. It's like God.
There's a lot of people we can't talk to.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I think I think also have you talked to, is Ron Lamster around?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He's one of them we have interviewed.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
And then
that's why we were scrambling at the beginning.
right. Ron, I think, definitely. And Michael Wilson?
We haven't interviewed him yet.
Yeah, I think he would be an important person. So I'm kind of really kind of going back, but then you really kind of go into the root of the origins, ground zero. Other people will come to me. I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
But,
well, we just didn't want to overlook somebody who for you is super connected to maybe somebody that could give us a perspective that the other interviews we haven't covered particular.
I'll think about it too, and
Okay.
other people will come to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. This is the list. You've seen the list.
Okay.
Here's another list. The same list.
Have you talked to David Sellier?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. He would be another person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
here's what we want of this. If
Okay.
somebody is, just go down the list as slowly as you can make
Okay.
yourself go, and tell us about that person, because the great majority of people do not know any of these people. They've heard about them, but they don't know what they look like. They don't know why they're memorable, what you remember about them in particular. So if you have any memories connected with them, funny, unfunny, whatever, just free associate about that person and let us know who you're talking about.
Okay. Okay. Ivan Bailey.
All right. Who was he?
He was an artist, and as I recall, he had a studio at King Plow, King Plow Art Center in Atlanta, where Actors Express is now. And he did amazing work with stuff I can't even imagine. With iron, right? And he did all this sculpture, right, and that kind of thing. And just a really sweet man. I mean, he was just.
What did he look like?
He was tall, incredibly tall, and thin, like real thin, and dark hair. I think usually had a beard or mustache, and was just a sweetheart. I mean, and also I thought just an amazing artist. It's like I couldn't even imagine that somebody could do what he did. Come up with these
construction
products. Yeah.
Okay.
But also he was just a really warm, welcoming, heartfelt person. This sad. Now Terry Barfield, someone I knew for a long time. Well before we would go to the running water together. And I remember one time that he and I were very interested in the same guy, and I got him the first night and he got him the second night. He was really pissed. But he made up for it. It's like, okay, well.
All right, now what did he look like?
Terry was also very thin, and kind of dark blonde. And as I remember, I think he originally came from Louisiana, because I remember he told us, we were in sort of the gay men's support group, he told us about the king cake, and I never heard of that. I'm like a Yankee carpetbagger. So I've been here most of my life now. And that was amazing to me, that they had that kind of tradition, where you would plant the little baby inside the cake, and Terry was just a really a great person too. I remember that he and Franklin and Russ Craven's Raven Wolf Dancer and Neil all lived in the same house on Iverson, which is just around the corner from here, and that they kind of had this, and that was kind of like a de facto gay center, that house, and they were just really connected to each other. And then he was also part of some of those gay male spiritual groups that started. Yeah. There was a men's support group that met for a while. Yeah, yeah. Malcolm Boyd, I guess he came to one of the conferences and presented.
Yeah.
And I remember how impactful he was to me as I was trying to come out in the 60s with his book, Are You Running With Me, Jesus? And that he had a prayer in there about a gay bar. And I had never seen that, you know, in any spiritual, it's like, wow, you know, it's just like a prayer for, you know, the people in the gay bar. I don't remember him specifically at the conference though, but I remember how life-changing he was to me, that he came out with such a book, and then I think later he came out openly gay, but not at the time. And he was he the partner of that guy that was the editor of The Advocate? I think he was, because I did some work with him.
I think so.
Yeah, I can't think of what his name was. But I mean, I wrote a couple pieces for The Advocate, and he was my editor. And I think he, what's his name? Come to me. Oh, I think he and Malcolm were partners. James Broughton, I remember, of course, from public readings. And I just remember that he had the most wonderful way of being, that he was... I can't remember exactly what he said, but something like, you know, if it feels good, do it, or, you know, something like, you should just, if you feel like dancing, just dance. Just so unfettered.
Yeah.
And John Burnside, he was the partner of Harry, I believe. Yeah. Yeah, and he always seemed to me to be very much in Harry's shadow.
Yes.
You know, like
little wife.
Yeah, exactly. I always think of him with, you know, pearls and gloves, and not literally, but kind of figuratively, and you know, I mean, Harry was such a, you know, sort of, you know, taking all the oxygen out of the room. John was like, you know, his little helpmate. Let's see. Okay. Harry Hay. I guess I've already covered Harry, right? Right. Oh, Tree Walker. Oh, I feel I miss him. Yeah, Martin is Ignatius.
Why do you miss him?
Well, he was, you know, it's like so many of these guys, they're just great people. One of the things that is hard for me is that although I have very much a spiritual practice and everything like that, I've never felt like I'm one of like the core people, or one of the core group, or something like that. And that whole thing I was talking about later, about, you know, back to the land, and being like a nature spirit, or I mean, I have an affinity for it, but I don't think I am it.
I understand.
Do you?
Yeah.
Okay. So, because like I say...
I approve, but I do not wish to live that life.
Well, it's just not... It's like, I remember it was a big conflict for me when I would go to the running water. And I'd hear all the things, and there was so much trashing of the culture and the civilization, and, you know, the politics, and you know, wanting to be out in the world. And I thought, you know, but I'm a writer, and I want to publish, and I want to get in as many magazines and newspapers. I want to, you know, get my work out as much as possible. And so the thing I really loved about Martin was that I just feel like he really embodied like the nature spirit and the essence, and that whole name he took on, Tree Walker, but didn't bludgeon you with it, you know, because some people do.
Yeah.
And there's this sort of sometimes sometimes unspoken and sometimes overt superiority.
Yeah.
You know, well, you know, I'm this, and I'm really connected, you know, to the earth and to nature, and then the plants talk to me. I mean, I'm just, you know, hyperbole, but it's sort of like, well, the plants don't talk to me. I'm not, the plants aren't talking to me. It's like, what's wrong with me?
Did you ever write about GSV, by the way? Have you ever written an article?
It's definitely like what you talked about, like weaving. It's there. I think it's there in every word. But I don't think I've ever done a piece specifically about it, but I definitely have referred to it and talked about it, and talked it up. You know, because I think the thing that always really attracted me was that it was such an alternative. You know, but a lot of it, to be totally honest, I mean, it's sort of like I don't feel like I fit anywhere. You know, I don't really fit into the gay bars, and of course I'm, you know, going to be 69 tomorrow. You know, it's like, okay, well, that's, you know, the train has left the station. So I haven't ever really felt completely at home there, and then I don't feel completely at home at GSV either. You know, because it's like, okay, well, I'm not this, you know, and I am real spiritual and everything like that, but not in maybe the GSV. And there is not one way either. You know, and that's what I'd like to see too, is maybe say, okay, there's varieties here, and there's different ways of being spiritual and metaphysical, and you know, really to say that in so many words. Yeah. Something that maybe not necessarily needs to be said, but I'd like to hear, you know, just so people can understand that. And that's the thing that I loved about Martin, was that he just sort of seemed to be it, but then didn't beat you up about it. You know, he was just, okay, this is just who I am. This is just how I am. You know, and I just remember him. See, I don't know if I'm remembering this accurately or not, but I seem to remember that he had a staff. That he had this, you know, and that was sort of like a totem, and it was like. It was like a spiritual tool, you know. I just am very sad thinking about it. But I believe in life after life. Yeah. So it's like I feel like all these people are still with us. Raphael Lago. Did he recently pass? Oh my God.
This always happens in an interview. People see names they didn't want to be there.
When did he?
I think, was it the last couple of months?
4 months ago, maybe.
Oh my God. Look what just happened. Wow.
So I didn't know him. Did you?
Oh my God, yes.
Was he from Atlanta?
Oh my dear God, yes. No, he's Latino, so I don't think he was originally from Atlanta. I can't remember his specific background. The thing that is, here's a story. The thing that was funny to me was that, you know, one of my many different, you know, what do I need to do to make enough money to live? And one of the things that before I received my inheritance, thank you, Daddy, he was the president of the American College for Applied Arts. And I started teaching English as a second language there. And that was probably, I think it was like 1995, 1994, something like that. Because I remember I was there during the Olympics, which was in 1996, the Atlanta Olympics. So Raphael was the president of the college, and was not out particularly, but then I would see him out, and that was a little awkward.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, for all intents and purposes, you were my ultimate boss, and then here you are at the Eagle. carrying on.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And I will never forget that the guy that owned the college, I believe, was a Republican. And that was bizarre. American College for the Applied Arts. So an art school, basically.
Yeah.
And the person that owned it was a Republican. And one day, Mr. Lago came up to me and told me, I mean, it was not an offer, told me that the students, the students I had, were going to go to this Republican rally. And I think it was, who was running? I think Phil Graham, I think, was a senator who was running for president as a Republican. And so just told me, okay, that rather than having classes that day, that the students were going to go to the rally. And I remember telling him, well, I'm not going. I thought, oh my God, what am I doing here? You know, it's like, but I wasn't going to no rally for no Phil Graham. And the thing that also really bothered me about that was that, of course, a lot of the students were people of color, and they were from other countries. And I thought, so they're going to go to this rally, and then they could say, oh look, you know, here's Asian people, and here's Latino people, and here's African people. And that just is like, oh, how dare you use my students? But it wasn't up to me to decide. I mean, I was just a teacher, and the person who was in charge of the program, it was fine with her. It was like, okay, fine. Well, I'm not going. You know, I remember telling him, I'm not going to go to the rally. And I didn't have repercussions for it. But at the same time, I thought, well, gosh, I wish I could have, you know, kept them from going. But then, I mean, that was a long time ago, and then you know, of course, I know Raphael from, you know, Gay Spirit Visions, and I kind of also thought, well, you know, he probably did whatever he had to do, and it was a difficult position, you know, as a gay man, you know, to be in the position that he was at the college, but I've gosh. I remember going to his house, you know, and having dinners there. So I can't believe it. Wow. Bill Manili, I remember Bill really well, and again, just a really, really sweet man, and I remember that he was very quiet. And somebody you kind of had to, like, you know, go to and draw out and engage. And also that he seemed a little sad to me, because I think he had hepatitis for a long time, and it was always so, like, you know, say, don't kiss me on the mouth, don't kiss me on the lips. You know, it's fine. But you know, I was just sad for him, and it almost seemed to me that he sort of succumbed. So I don't mean to be critical, but you know, it's like that, you know, rage against the dying of the light. You know, and it just sort of seemed to me that he kind of said, oh, you know, well, I got hepatitis, and you know. So I don't mean to be critical of him. He was a very, very sweet guy. Let's see. Oh, John Mungo. I had a big crush on John Mungo.
He's another person I don't know.
Yeah, as I recall.
What does he look like?
Wow, I thought he was to die for. You asked me.
Because
as I remember, I like men, period, right? I like all kind of men. But I remember he was like kind of a big guy, and kind of dark blonde, and kind of hunky, and if I'm remembering correctly, I hope I am, just sort of like, oh boy, you turn me on. That's one reason I'm gay.
Yeah.
You're, and I think also he did some body movement workshops or something like that,
Okay.
as I seem to recall. But I remember he was just I didn't really know him very well, but I thought he was just a really beautiful man,
Mm-hmm.
physically, and seemed like a really nice guy too. You know. Now Ramon I knew really well, and I remember going to things at his house. He lived on Lively Ridge, which is just off of Briarcliff, and that people would gather at his house a lot. And I believe that he designed the atrium of the Alliance Theater there at the Woodruff Art Center. I think he designed that atrium.
Mm-hmm.
So he was incredibly talented, incredibly gifted, and just a really sweet person also. And I remember he would talk a lot about the conflict of being Latin and being gay. And I think his mother lived for a long time, and that was sort of challenging, you know, to, you know, try to take care of his mother and be gay and be open and be himself, and then he had this, you know, I think really traditional Catholic Latino mother. But he was a very dear person, and also I think a real community builder.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, I have a lot of. It's so sad. I can't do it. That's why I'm glad I believe in life after life. And, you know, I've had spiritual experiences of people who passed on and things like that. So and Crazy All, like I've already talked about him, and what a great healer I thought he was. I remember one time with him, he was talking to me about how people who've been physically abused, and I did have some experience of physical abuse, how their calves would be really big. And then he was working on my body, and I sort of hiked up my pants, and it was like, oh my God, your calves are huge. We both sort of laughed. It's like, okay, there it is. But anyway. Now, Rocco, he was sort of blonde, right?
Rocco Pat?
Yeah, I think. And was he LeBron's partner?
No, he was Peter Kendrick's partner.
Okay. Peter was blonde.
Yes.
Peter Kendrick was blonde. I can't remember that I knew him all that well, but there was there was a coterie. There was Michael Wilson and Ron Lamb and Rocco Pat and Peter Kendrick, and they were kind of the cabal.
The landowners.
Yeah, of the landowners.
Yeah.
Of Running Water.
Yeah.
Right. So again, it was sort of like, okay, so here's the visionaries, and here's the vision, and you know, here's the
new
presentation, and yeah, and then you know, and again, like I said, it was kind of like, well, how do I fit into that, and do I fit into that, and I feel like I fit into that, but that's not exactly who I am, and so how can I be part of that?
Mm-hmm.
Philip Rush, and I knew Philip obviously.
What did he look like? Because I never met him.
There's a picture of him at the Rush Center.
Okay.
There's a picture there. I think right in the annex there's a picture where we meet for the archives group. Kind of heavy set, a little overweight, and dark haired, and again somebody who was just a really big community builder and community organizer. And I remember when they started the Center for Civil and Human Rights, going to a meeting at City Hall, and it was immediately after the holidays. It was in January, early January.
Yeah.
We were talking about how, oh, we've had this, complete, Christmas, New Year's Eve coma.
Yes.
And now, here we are, and we're here in this meeting to establish. And then Doug Shipman, who was the first director of the Center for Civil and Human Rights, spoke, and Shirley Franklin that was something she was really doing. And so Philip was very involved in all kinds of things like that, and city hall things and politics and stuff like that. I do remember that I went to a meeting where he was, and I was with Tracy McDaniel, who does the transgender rights groups. I can't think of what her organization is called, but I do remember that he saw me with Tracy, and he immediately wrote a check to Tracy. And it was like, but what about our group? What about Touching Up Our Roots, George's LGBT History Project? And so that was like, okay, all right, whatever. But he was a good guy. I mean, and really very community spirited, and I think so I can't think of all the different things that he did, but I think he also really put some things in place to really build up organizations. And of course the center is named for him, the Rush Center itself. John Stowe, I've already mentioned John Stowe. John was not very nice to me. I do have to say that. he was not very kind to me. I remember that we were both interested in the same person, and I was thinking about that last night, writing notes. And it's kind of like, well, all's fair in love and war, but you could have been a little nicer about it, just because you got him and I didn't, and and he was sort of nah. And it's like, okay, Jim, it's like, thank you very much, yes. And that was interesting to me too, and then I don't know how accurate my recall is, but that when I first met him, he was like this biologist and this scientist, and he was kind of putting down all this stuff. And then, then he got involved in the flower essences, and he was like this, like this herbal healer.
Right.
And I think, well, that's an interesting, trajectory. King Thaxton, I kind of knew King at a distance, and was somebody I just sort of admired at a distance. And now, how to describe John was very attractive, dark-haired guy, and really pretty. I mean, really good looking. King was a really big guy. I remember he just seemed to me incredibly tall, and just huge and big boned, and again, I just sort of didn't really get that close to him, but I was sort of being in awe of him. I mean, he just had this energy and this spirit, and he was doing all these different things. And was he an artist too? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm sort of in awe of people like Ivan Bailey, for example, and they do things, and that's not something that I do at all, or know how to do, or would even begin to know how to begin to do, and they do it. Now Dennis Van Avery, I got to know him some at the conference, and we were talking about helping him to write his book, and that never happened. But what a sweet man he was, and I think also really wore his challenge really well. That he was ill for a long time, and just really lived with it. Yeah. And it's like, what Elizabeth Kubler-Ross says, live fully until you die. Mm-hmm. And I think he really did that. And so, we would talk about that, about how, well, your time is probably limited, and if you're going to do the book, you better do the book. I'm not sure if he ever did his book.
He did a book.
He did a book.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. I'm glad he did.
They gave it out at his memorial service.
Oh, they did? Okay. Yeah. He was, see, sort of contrasting him with Bill.
Bill.
Mealy.
Oh yeah.
Bill
yeah.
Mealy.
Uh-huh.
And
Bill
I
was more resigned.
yeah, that's what and Dennis wasn't. Yeah, Bill seemed to sort of this is my fate, resigned. And it's like, and again, I don't want to be mean or anything, but Dennis, I remember we were sitting there eating at in the Commons and just started laughing uproariously. That was so great, and it was like okay, laugh in the face of. I forget what we were laughing about, but and then I think you did workshops about living with,
Chronic illness.
Yeah. I think you did a workshop on that. Okay. Well, then the next person is Raven Wolf Dancer, and like I said, I knew Raven, Russ Craven's, when he and Frank and T. Barfield and Neil were all living together, and I just known him a long time, and I was really happy for him that he really found his niche with, I think, Gay Spirit Visions and carrying that on. I had a really I was thinking about this when I was going through the list. I had a really unusual experience with him. Like I say, I've always been into all this, metaphysical stuff. And at one point I was doing channeling, and I was sitting and reading for people and channeling information. And so I did that with him. And it must have been, I was living in a place, I lived there from like 1980 until 1992. And I remember doing the reading for him there, 325 North Highland. And we were sitting in the kitchen, and I was channeling for him. And it's kind of like, okay, you just give whatever you got.
Yeah.
And I don't really do that anymore. I meditate every day and that kind of thing. But I haven't really tried to do the channeling in a long time. But I do remember that we were doing the session, and he was talking about a guy he had been really involved with, and that it was a fairly fractious relationship, and I remember as we were doing the session, my experiencing the emotional pain that he felt with this guy, and really backing away from that. And I thought, this is not my pain. This is not emotional pain that I've had, and I'm experiencing his pain. And of course it was awful. It was a terrible feeling. And I thought, I've got to really be careful about doing this kind of activity where I'm not feeling, people's suffering that is not my suffering. But I remember that it was gosh, and it sort of taught me in terms of being, like, when you do a lot of spiritual things, maybe something else we could talk about at GSV, is that you do sort of need to protect yourself first, and sort of put yourself in a bubble of light, and put yourself in, and that kind of thing, and not just step into, because that's kind of what I had done. I kind of stepped into it openly, but I remember being really said, okay, Dave, you got to be careful about what you're doing here, and it was like, it's like, oh my God. I mean, I've had that experience myself. Both with Greg and with Peter, in terms of, really feeling a lot of pain emotionally in an intimate relationship. I thought Raven was just a really great person, and a real visionary, and that he took his vision and he manifested it in Gay Spirit Visions. And I also really miss him. You want me to describe him?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was kind of, I remember him as being kind of short, not short, but maybe 5'7", 5'8", something like that. And very dark hair, black hair, and I guess he got gray later. And kind of had a pugnacious quality about him, I thought, and just sort of a pug nose and a kind of a bulldog aspect. But again, I was really, really happy for him when he got involved with this, and I thought that's your métier, that's perfect for you. So.
Okay. All right. Is there anything about your experience of GSV that we have not touched on that you want to be sure and communicate to anybody that ever watches this interview or reads it, of what it's meant to you or what it hasn't meant to you or how it's disappointed you, or anything that we haven't mentioned that you was hoping that we would get to and that we didn't?
No, I don't
Now's
think so.
the chance to tack it on.
I don't think so. I think I pretty much.
Okay.
Let me look, because I wrote some notes down. Now I do want to mention Fegala, who was part of Running Water, and that he was also a real lightning rod, and somebody who was just really totally out there. And Fegala, I believe, in Yiddish means faggot, and that was the name he took on himself. And that
well,
was
he should be on this list. I think he was at some of the conferences.
I don't.
Or maybe he was just at
I'm
the
not sure what
ones
his quote unquote real name was.
Fagala ben Miriam.
Okay, Fagala ben is not on here.
Okay, I'm going to have to find out from Franklin if he was part of GSV,
part of GSV,
or before that.
Yeah.
He may not have been in the area when we started having conferences.
Well, there were people.
I thought he was in the first picture. Remember, we had that group photo.
Yeah, on the steps.
In that.
Well, he should be on here then,
because
he was somebody that I remember when I went to the Running Water thing. I remember one time sitting in the circle, and all of a sudden people started taking their clothes off, started getting totally naked in the circle.
Yeah.
And I was like, I thought, okay, calm down. It's like, it's okay. They can get completely naked if they want to, but that was sort of, and I remember he did that a lot. I just always remember him naked, regular running around naked, and he was just so blatant, and so in your face about being gay, and just the fact that he would take on that name, which I think is an epithet, and it's like faggot, queer, right. It's like I'm Fegala. It's like, whoa. And because I'm afraid to be that overt, and that out there, and wow, and it's like, look at me, I'm big old homo, and it's like, well, don't make yourself such a big target, It's like, I just remember he was just such a life force and such an energy and such a catalyst. And then I also remember Severin that way too. Like Severin, who came to some of the Running Water events, Paul Dillon, and he was the, I don't think he really was transgender, so to speak, but definitely was non-binary and gender fluid, and came to some of those things, and was really an important person in terms of Atlanta in like the 70s, and then was part of the Running Water experience. So I just want to mention him, who's kind of been forgotten. I just, I don't know. I mean, I'm thank you. I'm grateful to be able to do this.
Good.
So.
Thank you very much.